what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
All right, so aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 24th, 2017. Dealing with all kinds of issues. My server, again, just at show start, they do a massive denial of service attack on it and just try and keep us all messed up that way, which basically, to me, is an indication of just how scared the establishment is getting over the fact that the American people are waking up to what's really been going on in our country. So we just have to bear with it and deal with all the evil people. Who are the money junkies and all the rest of that stuff. Anyway, let's get into the program. Our third hour guest today is going to be Ellen Brown, talking about, among other things, Trump's $1 trillion infrastructure plan and how other countries fund infrastructure without burdening their populations with huge amounts of unpayable debt. So that'll be an interesting conversation. We're going to do the entire third hour on that one. Monday, June 5th, of course, Gilad Atzmon is going to be joining us, talking about his recent concert tour, lecture tour, his latest book, which is actually very, very good. It's called Being in Time. It's hitting Amazon today, and we did a link to that as well. It's a very good book. A lot of insights in there, and he's actually a very, very good writer. Okay, now then, getting on to the news here. Obviously, the top news continues to be all over the place. The bombing in Manchester, and as is usually the case, everybody is trying to make as much political hay out of this as they can and just score points for whatever their particular agenda is. But they're really fanning up the fear factor, and apparently the British Prime Minister has elevated the terror threat level to critical, and they're out there saying that a new attack is imminent. Well, if they know a new attack is imminent, why can't they stop it? But they're out there just banging away at the fear-mongering. They have deployed police onto the streets. It looks like martial law. In fact, people over in London are saying troops on the street. They haven't seen this many troops on the street since World War II. And Parliament is closed to the public. The changing of the guard is canceled because of this warning that there is another terror attack coming. And interestingly enough, the London police have started launching a crackdown on free speech on Twitter. Apparently, the Metropolitan Police are investigating Twitter users who speak out against the Manchester attack. Now, why would it be wrong to speak out against the attack? Well, part of it may be, again, we've got competing agendas. We've got the globalists and the open border and the EU supporters who want to downplay that this had anything to do with Islam, and they don't want to see it harming their open borders refugee agenda. And then, of course, you have the other agenda, which wants to fan up that this is all about Islam in order to justify more war in the Middle East. So they're fighting back and forth on that one here. Now, interesting little article. This came out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain, and it says, the Manchester bomber had returned to Britain from Libya just 3 days before the attack, as his father, who had al-Qaeda links, and younger brother are arrested in Tripoli. And going through this story, Syria is mentioned over a dozen times in this article. He may have gone to Syria. He may have had Syrian help. And so it looks to me like, at least from this newspaper's point of view, this story is going to be used to basically fan up the idea of Great Britain going back into the war on Syria, rejoining the coalition, and go on down there and just pound those gosh darn Syrians until Assad gives up. Now, another little article, this came out of Land Destroyer, is saying that the UK government was harboring these terrorists linked to this bombing for decades, which raises the possibility that these were actually undercover intelligence assets. We know that we have seen the same thing here in the United States, where the FBI or the CIA will literally manufacture these terror groups to wag at us when they need us scared into obedience. Now, so far, somebody has, in fact, claimed credit for the Manchester bombing, saying that they're ISIS, which you don't really know that. Somebody picks up a phone or sends a fax and says, I'm ISIS, we did it, come and get us. And the timing here is, in fact, rather suspect because you've got Donald Trump in Israel bowing to Netanyahu and talking about peace even as he dumps billions of dollars of weapons into the area. Of course, very, very convenient for Netanyahu, we have another one of these terror attacks to support his agenda. Now, musician and songwriter Morrissey is out there basically saying he's chastising politicians, saying they're petrified to admit Islamic extremism behind the terror. And again, we have these two clashing agendas. One is to fan up, it had everything to do with these Middle Eastern Muslim countries, let's go and make war. And on the other side, you've got the open borders people trying to say, no, it's got nothing to do with Islam, it was just a crazed lone nut assassin. Although, as of last report, British police have arrested 5 people, 5 perpetrators on this. Now, we're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. And unfortunately, tragically, there has been a mosque set on fire near Manchester that is being seen as a probable retaliation by somebody against the concert bombing. And these things can get way, way out of control. Interestingly enough, one of the anchors on BBC is out there saying, well, Europe's just getting used to this, and we're just going to have to get used to it. This is the new normal, and we're never ever going to be able to get rid of all of this, so it's just part of life again. And that's quite a contrast. Remember back in 1940? You had Churchill out there, never yield to force, never yield to the might of the enemy, and today it's, we just got to get used to this. I mean, when it was the Nazi war machine that was dropping bombs all over London with the V1 and the V2. They fought back. They finally fought through to those launching rails in Peenemünde and just blew them up. So everyone is using this for whatever agenda. And over in France, citing the Manchester bombing, they have extended their now almost permanent state of emergency until November 1st. It was due to expire in July, but no, they're going to keep it going to November 1st. And it does look like it's going to become permanent with all of the added authority for the police and all the restrictions on ordinary people and all the silencing of dissent and criticism. It's an emergency. We have to ignore human rights and the right of free speech. It's an emergency. Every tyrant, every dictatorship goes through that phase. We're in a state of national emergency. All the freedoms you used to have, we have to take those away from you to make you safe. And you lose your freedoms and you're not safe. Seeing it happen all over again. I got to tell you, we have a lot of military aircraft flying overhead right now. It's making Claire and I very, very nervous. And I realize it's training flights. Still, there's very obvious escalation here. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned at the top of the show, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, getting on to these congressional investigations into Russiagate and who knew what and what was going on, apparently a major contradiction has surfaced between the testimony that former FBI Director James Comey gave on when he notified Congress that there was an investigation into Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, and what Brennan said, because apparently Comey is saying that he notified Congress in March of this year, and Brennan just testified under oath that the CIA notified Congress last September. And it almost looks like Brennan is throwing Comey under the bus. But the real question needs to be, talk to some of those members of Congress, the Gang of Eight, the Intelligence Committee, and just say, when were you notified and who notified you? And they're already bogging down in this minutia. And that may be because they're not finding anything. It's a whole lot of nothing. In fact, there's an article that came out over in RINF.com, New Cracks in Russiagate Assessment. They actually can't find anything. All of these liberals like Nancy Pelosi are being forced to admit, no, we have seen no evidence whatsoever. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, that passage you read about mainstream media, a story there, it just caught my attention because key words of speculation, could, might, may have, and every time I hear those words, I know we're not talking about fact or evidence. We're just talking about speculation, and that has no business in journalism whatsoever.
Well, I agree.
So I just want to point that out.
I agree, but when somebody in the corporate media wants to sell an untruth, they'll either use those qualifiers or they'll pose it as a question in order to avoid the possibility of a lawsuit. Because then they can go into court and say, I didn't actually say that the plaintiff was having sex with farmyard animals. I just asked a question, and that's reasonable, and that's why they do that.
Yeah, it's their disclaimer. Hey, I just want to mention that, and you've talked about this before, I mean, John Oliver's show was a pretty good show at one time, and now I just see it as a pretty much an anti-Trump bashing machine on there right now, and it just sickens me to see, well, you know, there was a funny show, and now they're all kind of jumping on that bandwagon. Even Jimmy Fallon now is apologizing for being easy on Trump, and Dave Chappelle, and you can see all the twisting, the nipple twisting going on to say, hey, comply, go after this guy, you know, come on, you know, go along with the program here, and it's kind of sickening that people can't, you know, just, I mean, he's a show host, you have guests on your show, and that's what you do, you interview people. But to get political like they're doing right now and getting nasty, it's kind of sickening.
Well, I've stopped watching all of those shows ever since they started doing that, and I don't know what their ratings are, and for all we know, their ratings may be artificially inflated to keep them on the air. It's almost like the movie Network, where Howard Beale sells out to the corporate interests, and his ratings start to plunge. And because the corporate interests own the network, they say, just keep him on the air. That's it. We don't care how bad his ratings are. You keep him on the air selling this until finally the producers of the news program have this guy killed. Of course, at the very end of the movie, it says, this is the story of Howard Beale, the first man to be killed for poor ratings. And if you have never seen that movie, you ought to. It's an iconic piece. Padachevsky just did a fabulous job on the screenplay. And of course, it's also the source of that, you know, that quote, I'm mad as heck, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
No, I agree. No, I just assume they're tweaking the numbers even on those reviews and ratings for their programming. I mean, they're tweaking everything else. Why not tweak that, too, to their advantage? And it's not true. I think people are getting tired of this. They're getting tired of this anti-Trump stuff. So, hey, wait a minute. Let the guy have a chance. Criticize him later, but let him start to do something. You know, give him a chance.
Well, they're trying to obstruct him at every level. They're trying to block any changes to Obamacare. They're still fighting against the wall, and he's already caved in on them with the war agenda. And we're going to go on over and make the rest of the world us. Not that we're a good example for anybody to follow, but there's still Hillary's people seem to be clinging to this idea they can get him out of the Oval Office and through some machinations get her in. Which is ridiculous. If Trump is removed from office by whatever means, Mike Pence becomes the president. And Hillary might be desperate enough to change parties and try and become Pence's VP and then have Pence knocked off. But it is out of control. And the rest of the world is looking at the functioning of our federal government, and they're scratching their heads and saying, this is obviously breaking down.
No, one thing that does concern me real quick here is that picture in the paper today showing Donald Trump shaking hands with Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm a little concerned about that, you know, that whole Israel thing, and that seems to be growing stronger, not pulling away, and that concerns me.
Well, unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of the very wealthy supporters of Israel in this country supported Donald Trump, and now he's got to pay back those favors.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, a little bit of good news coming on out there. Apparently, Joe Lieberman is now off the list of possible FBI directors. I know when it was said that he was being considered, he was even at the top of the list, and everybody was just screaming what an utter disaster that would be for the American people. But apparently, for whatever reason, he is now off the list. He's not being considered for FBI director. Now, as you know, in all of this Russia collusion and so forth, Donald Trump recently has made a slight adjustment to his story, saying that he himself personally did not collude with the Russians, opening the door to speculation that maybe somebody else close to him did. And a lot of eyes are now focused on Jared Kushner, who's definitely been one of the most pro-war, pro-Israel voices that have Donald Trump's ear. And there is some talk going on that he is, in fact, a person of interest in this Russian collusion investigation. But there's a lot more information starting to surface about him that makes it look like he may not be in the White House much longer. And again, there is word there are going to be 3 more firings of the White House staff in the near future. And apparently Jared Kushner did not disclose his business ties to George Soros, to Thiel, and to Goldman Sachs. And apparently he owes over $1 billion in loans. And so obviously that kind of an obligation, whoever he owes that money to, they're going to call him up and say, tell Trump this. And Jared is going to say, yes, sir. Give me a little more time on my loan repayment, and I will feed that into the president's ear. So there's obviously an issue there. And we've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. This whole Russia bashing everything, it's falling apart. And key Democratic officials are now warning the base not to expect any evidence of a Trump-Russia collusion. They actually oversold that. And the Democrats are saying, where is it? Where is it? You told us that Russia and Trump were working together to get rid of our Empress Hillary, and we're waiting. Where's the evidence? And the Democratic leadership is saying, well, actually, there doesn't seem to be any. We just thought it was likely because Russia liked Trump, ignoring the fact that all of the election fraud that was discovered favored Hillary last year. But it's starting to come apart. And it's just this giant smear job from the liberal establishment, aided by the corporate media. And once again, the corporate media is winding up with egg on their face. Now then, new development here. This is coming out of Political Insider. Classified documents confirm that Barack Obama spied on Americans for years. This is a Circa report that revealed previously top-secret documents that Obama was spying on Americans for political reasons. They weren't terrorists, they weren't criminals, but the National Security Agency routinely violated American privacy protections and failed to disclose the extent of the problems until the final days before Donald Trump was elected president. In other words, they wanted to clean up the records so Trump couldn't come back and say, you were hiding all this. No, we're not hiding. It's right there on your desk. Even the FISA court, which is seen by many as being little more than a rubber stamp for surveillance, came on out and said that Obama's widespread illegal searches of American citizens represents a serious Fourth Amendment issue. And yes, it absolutely does. And the question is, how many people did he spy on? I mean, it sounds like it was a lot more than Richard Nixon was spying. And was it spying for political gain? And that needs to come on. All right. Now, when we come back from this next commercial break, there's been a new development in the case of those 4 House IT staffers who were moved away from their position for breaking into computers they were not supposed to break into. There's been a new development. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, one of the stories that was floating around regarding computers, and it sort of kind of got overshadowed by Seth Rich and a lot of other things, but there was a big stink because these 4 IT staffers working in the House of Representatives were caught accessing the computers of members of the House. And it was a big stink, and they were removed from their positions to new positions, and they finally started getting fired. But apparently there was a concern that these people working on the inside were, in fact, snooping and spying on members of the House of Representatives. And apparently one of them has now managed to leave the country, even though under investigation by the Capitol Police, has left the country, gone back to Pakistan, and according to this article out of Daily Caller, is now under government protection in Pakistan because apparently his family is very wealthy, and they're very connected to the government, and they have VIP level protection. So something is going on there. Now, as a little footnote to this story, when the investigation first started into these IT staffers, Debbie Wasserman Schultz herself threatened the chief of police for holding the computer equipment for the investigation. So she was trying to like get all the physical evidence back and under her control. So there's something going on there. So again, my primary theory behind this whole email scandal is that while she served as Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton was repeating the Chinagate scandal, selling secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver the material and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. And maybe, if that was what was going on, the espionage went a little bit broader. And they were using these IT workers to spy on members of Congress and get their information for sale to interested parties. When you look at how everybody is just panicking and circling the wagons around this, there's something there. There's definitely something there. This is the point where all the cover-ups overlap. It's the maximum point of protection. And there has to be a reason. Now, speaking of computers and hacking, the United Nations Security Council's North Korea Sanctions Committee has come under massive denial of service attack. And, of course, they're all implying it's North Korea because, after all, North Korea was behind WannaCry and North Korea was behind this and that. In all probability, it's another false flag to keep building the case against North Korea. Now, getting on back to Seth Rich, PolitiFact is out there with articles and editorials saying that the theory that Seth Rich was the DNC leaker, it's nonsense. It's pants on fire. It's tinfoil hat. But if you actually read through the article, they have absolutely nothing with which to back that up. Because there is no evidence that Russia broke into the DNC email server. The DNC never allowed that server to be examined by outside forensics experts to find evidence of who got in there. And we have the story from Kim.com and various other individuals that, yes, Seth Rich was the leaker of those emails. And by the way, if you look at the date of all those leaked emails, they stop at the time he was killed. So it's a very strong circumstantial case that Seth Rich was the leaker, and no case that he wasn't the leaker, and they're still out there pushing this as hard as they can. And to show you how ridiculous all of this is getting, the Washington Compost has an article saying that even if Seth Rich was the DNC leaker, it doesn't affect the accusations that Russia was tinkering with our election to help Donald Trump and to harm Hillary Clinton. It's a non-issue now. We need to focus on. In other words, they've been caught in a lie, and they're trying to recover from it. And they're trying to say it was never a big issue anyway. It was, even though for months and months the corporate media kept screaming, Russia hacked the DNC email server. Now they're trying to pull back from it. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call. Dave in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. Yes, everyone speaks about the leaks as if they're the crime in itself. No one wants to speak about what's actually leaked, the documents themselves, what's in them. Those are where the crimes are buried. No one wants to talk about that.
Well,
people are dying left and right.
We were talking about it when they came on out. But again, we're dealing with a governmental institution that simply does not want to look at any of that and is very offended that we would even be concerned as American citizens as to what was going on. And it's part of the cultural arrogance that seems to have emerged around our government, and we're seeing that probably most fully on public display with the attitude of the Democratic leadership, which is out there saying, yeah, forget what you vote for in the primaries. We reserve the right to choose the candidate we want, and your job is to just send in money and votes to support what we're doing. That, of course, is not how the United States is supposed to be working.
Absolutely, and of course, there's these 35,000, isn't it, emails that Hillary Clinton's banished off her server. No crime committed there, you know. And Huma Abedin's sharing the laptop with Anthony Weiner, 600,000 of them or something like that on there.
Yes,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, what's hidden in there?
We don't know. We're not being allowed to see what was in those emails. It's all very classified national security. And again, if I am correct, and if in fact Hillary was running an espionage operation through all these computers and the email server and the rest of it, the entire government is going to try and keep that story buried, because a scandal on that scale would bring down the entire government. That this was going on, and that the rest of the government knew it was going on, and were protecting her. And again, we look back at James Comey's press conference on the FBI investigation, and he went down the list of felony violations of Title 18 that she committed. And then he says, we're not going to recommend charges, which is not his job, by the way, because we couldn't find that she intended to do harm, even though Title 18 does not require intent. It says right there, negligent exposure of classified information outside secure facilities is a felony. It's a five-year prison sentence. And Hillary did it with her email server. Huma did it with the laptop. And none of these people are being charged or sent to jail. The goal here is to try and make this all go away. And frankly, it feels to me like they are very, very scared.
Comey was actually on the board of HSBC during the laundering.
Yes. They
got a deferment, and the special prosecutor in New York City at the time was Loretta Lynch.
Yes.
Nobody wants to talk about that, you know what I mean?
Well,
so, of course, there's a little bit of conflict of interest there.
Well, that is, of course, a peek into the real rotted core of all of this, and that is the CIA's drug running out of Arkansas. Well, they've been running drugs all over the place, but specifically relative to the Clintons and the Bushes, the CIA was running this covert operation out of Arkansas under then-Governor Bill Clinton. They were manufacturing untraceable military weapons, smuggling them down to Nicaragua, paying for it all by smuggling tons of cocaine back into the United States of America to sell to our children. And Bill Clinton provided operational security, kept the state drug investigators away from the airports that were being used, and he set up a little money laundry involving land flips and banks and the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And they all got very, very rich in the process, enough money where they could basically start making a power grab for the highest levels in the U.S. government. And for the American people to find out, after all this propaganda about the war on drugs and drugs are bad and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, to find out that the U.S. government itself is neck deep in the illegal drug trade. That, too, would bring the entire government crashing down. I have to be very honest. I'm rather amazed. History Channel is running a show, or about to run a show, in which they actually talk about how the CIA was smuggling cocaine into the United States of America. And it's a shame that Gary Webb is no longer with us, because he first broke the story in the corporate media, in the San Jose Mercury News, with his series Dark Alliance, about how the CIA was bringing cocaine into the United States of America and was the actual cause of the crack epidemic that was happening. And it was all to make money for these covert...
Freeway Ricky.
Yeah, Freeway Ricky Ross. And...
You covered all the bases there, and of course there's a blood slick from Arkansas all the way to D.C. with these people. And in 6 weeks, 5 people died. You know, Ash, Lucas, Seth Rich... got 1 or 2 others within 6 weeks of time, right around the time of the Democratic convention or the hearings that was going to come up about, you know, Hillary and her server and all that getting lost, and that all these people go testify, and all of a sudden, they drop dead. You know, these people are murderers. It's outrageous, and they get by with this.
It is, and again, it is a systemic problem. It's not just this corrupt group or that corrupt individual or this corrupt intelligence agencies. It is all corrupted, and they're just going to look out for each other and protect each other. And to heck with the law, to heck with morality, to heck with long-term consequences. They're just going to do that. Anyway, Dave, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go.
Thank you, Mike.
And before we take the next phone call, I think an indicator of just how scared the establishment is over all of the aspects of these stories is illustrated by Sean Hannity, who's done a 180-degree turn on the Seth Rich story. We were hearing earlier in the week, Sean Hannity, he's going to cover it, he's going to interview Kim.com, and he was out there on the air saying, I'm not letting this go, there's something here. And yesterday, apparently, Sean Hannity said that he will no longer discuss Seth Rich out of respect for the family's wishes. Now, that's what he said on the air. But what we're getting from the Political Insider is that Sean Hannity was approached by one of Rupert Murdoch's sons and told, you will drop this story. All right, another phone call. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, that's not what I want to talk about, but I just want to let you know I tweeted on his Twitter before to Hannity and said, you're not kidding anybody that you were told by Fox News to lay off. And it shows you Sean doesn't have any guts. The guy's a multimillionaire. He could easily let them fire him and, really get back at him while he's no longer with Fox News. And then probably have his own show somewhere else. He could name his price. Certainly on the internet. But anyway,
they may have told him that he would get really depressed and wind up in Fort Marcy Park. I mean, these are serious players here. But you're right about Fox Network, because the Fox Network went over to the D.C. affiliate, which first broke the story, and had them retracted.
Oh, my God. They're getting worse and worse. Well, I don't watch Fox anymore. Hannity was the last one I'd watch once in a while. Now I'm not even going to bother at all. When I'm at the gym, a lot of times I'll have it on the, if I'm working on a certain area, to have it up there, but that's about it. I got no use for them. But anyway, getting back to, the CIA drug smuggling, Gary Webb, I don't know, did you see the movie, Kill the Messenger?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you should. You should still get, I'm sure you still get a hold of it.
In my copious amounts of free time here.
But anyway, at the very end, I don't want to give you the whole thing, but at the very end, they showed actual film in South Central L.A. with, I think the guy's name was Deutsch at the time, was the CIA director.
Yes.
And he was in there. This was true. This was actual film. And you know who else was there, by the way, while he was doing it? None other than Maxine Waters now. So he was telling the people there how sorry he was that the CIA did this. There was a mistake or some crap like that. But, they admitted it. There's no question they admitted it.
Oh, yeah, they did admit it. And that is something that really ought to be, put in front of the American people's mind. The reason we have a drug problem in the streets of America is because the CIA is bringing it in. They were bringing in cocaine from Central America. They're bringing in opium from Afghanistan. They were bringing in opium from Vietnam. It's a big part of their business.
And what's his name? Freeway Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross, not that fat slop that correctional officer Rick Ross. The real Rick Ross has been on InfoWars quite a number of times. And he said it himself what they were doing. And by the way, he played a big part in that movie, not the actual, the actor who played it. There's no doubt. He said that's what turned him on, to finally understand what he was really doing. That he was actually working for the CIA, running drugs for the CIA.
Yep.
And he's totally turned himself around, at least from what I gather. That he
he has. He quit that, and he's trying to make amends there. But the one time I met him, courtesy of my first wife, who was heavily into the drug trade. He said, yeah, I'm actually working for the CIA, and that's why the police never touch me.
And is there any possibility you can get him back on your show?
I've never had him on my show, but I'll try and make an effort to get him on there. But here's the important thing. When if you run into anybody talking about this History Channel show, is tell them this is still going on right now, today. The war on drugs is really the war on the competition's drugs. It's a war on...
By the way, up to this... Yeah, but up to then, I really admired Ollie North. I thought the guy was on a level and all that. But
No.
after that movie and a little more research I found out, and I found out that Ollie North is really a dirtbag. And maybe that's one of the reasons with Hannity, he can't get things right, because he's kind of knows something about North, but he still calls him great friend and all that, has him on the show all the time. And, fact of the matter is, and it hurts me to say that, because I really admired the guy. I mean, not only was a Vietnam vet, he was actually, I thought he was really serving the country right, working for Ronald Reagan and all. Turns out he was a dirtbag. He was running drugs. Oh, Roger Stone.
No, hang on. You're missing an important point. When Oliver North was doing all this stuff down in Arkansas, he thought he was serving the interests of the United States of America, and that he was doing stuff involved with drugs. It was just, it's just one of the things we have to put up with to achieve our greater political agenda. The true believer syndrome is what it's called. People who are willing to violate the law, people who are willing to violate the law, and because they believe they serve a higher purpose. And it's an attitude that unfortunately infects a great deal of the government. But in Oliver North's own mind, he was a hero.
According to Roger Stone, though, his book about the Bushes, the recent one, Oliver North was making money out of it.
Oh, they all were.
Seemed to have any problem.
No, they all were. Yeah, they were all padding their wealth with this illegal cocaine money. It was just part of it. It was a perk of the job.
And then when that guy Steele, I forget his first name, was rubbed out, it seems like North very possibly was behind it.
You're talking about Barry Seal.
Was definitely behind it.
Yeah, you're talking about Barry Seal, who was one of the smuggling pilots. And unfortunately, he did get caught, and he decided that he was going to turn state's evidence against the smuggling ring, and of course that was a threat to the entire CIA operation, and yeah, that's why he was taken out.
I mean, this is it's unbelievable. I mean, this is a dirty government, and the CIA is right at the heart of it. Matter of fact, I think the CIA, I don't know if I've told you before, but I believe the CIA is one of the most evil organizations on the face of this earth. That doesn't mean everybody working for the CIA. I think a lot of these people who work for the CIA don't understand really what they're doing until they finally realize it, and then a lot of times they're the ones, the biggest whistleblowers. You take Ray McGovern, Kevin Schiff. This guy Steele, what's his name? Michael David Steele, another guy we should have on your show, and Larry Johnson. They'll come. They're some of the biggest whistleblowers, and they'll tell you what the CIA is about. They're doing everything they can now to reverse things, to wake people up.
Well, you need to understand that for the regular rank and file office workers, these agencies recruit at the college level, and the people in colleges, for the most part, believe what they see in the movies and TV shows about how these agencies are the good guys and they're doing wonderful work, and they'll be hired on in, and of course they are sequestered away from some of the darker operations. It's all, compartmentalized. And then they stumble into what's going on, and some will just say, oh, well, this is what I'm doing, and they'll make the moral compromise, and others simply can't. That's what happened with Edward Snowden. He joined the National Security Agency because he thought it was a great opportunity to work with cutting-edge computer technology and protect the United States of America, and then he saw how out of control it really was and what it was really all being used for, and that's when he decided that he could not make that moral compromise.
Kevin Schiff said basically they think they can, trust you. And when I say trust, I don't mean trust in a good way. I mean, that you're not going to open your mouth and you're going to do what you need to do, that's when they open more doors to you and let you get higher up in the agency.
Yes.
But if they figure you really believe in it, and you believe in the country, and you really want to do it, and you're really patriot, and you want to do a good job, they're going to leave you at the bottom. They're not going to let you into a lot of the secrets and things like that.
Well, also remember, most of the really dirty stuff is done through contracts, CIA contractors, and that's done to basically isolate the regular CIA employees from what is being done, and also to give the CIA deniability if something goes wrong. So the people who are doing the things like the drug running and everything, they're contractors. They're not actually showing up at CIA headquarters and punching a time clock.
That's true. And another thing too, a lot of businesses, Bushes are a prime example, and a lot of even your media, they actually are CIA people, but they're not employed. They're not like GS something working out of Langley, Virginia.
Yeah, they're compensated other ways. They're high salaries at the media. It's all part of Operation Mockingbird. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are almost to the end of the break here, and we've got to do some commercials. But yeah, we all know about Operation Mockingbird, and we know about the use of the contractors. And there's also the CIA proprietaries, companies that you probably have done business with and you don't know. They're actually covertly owned and operated by the Central Intelligence Agency. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Mark, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And turning over to the war zones, over in Syria, government forces are advancing against ISIS and the Western-backed militant groups on multiple front lines across Syria. The situation is heating up, and the U.S.-backed forces are sending more material in trying to stop this. But apparently in Aleppo, the Syrian Army Tiger forces have liberated Jamilia, Rasm al-Hammam, Masana, please forgive me if I am butchering these, Kanawiya, Kerbet Marza, and the so-called Second Farm. And they're making a lot of progress. They could very easily reach the stronghold of Maskana near Raqqa within this week. And apparently ISIS just simply does not have the manpower to stop the advance. Now, getting on back to this issue of civilians being killed, which the U.S. is still trying to say it's, horrible Assad, he's killing his own civilians. The United States killed a record number of civilians in the past month of strikes against ISIS, at least 225 civilians. And they never make a big deal about it. Oh, Assad gassed people at Idlib and all those horrible, horrible deaths. Well, you killed more in the bombings. May have killed more in the cruise missile attack. Well, it's just collateral damage. You're not supposed to pay attention to that. It's ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Now, apparently the U.S. so-called coalition forces have conducted an airdrop of forces in East Syria, supposedly against ISIS, and the Free Syria Army, most of whom are not from Syria, have kicked off Operation Desert Volcano to basically take control of this triangle area where the borders of Jordan, Syria, and Iraq meet. That's going to be the heart of the new Kurdistan. Meanwhile, the United Nations has partnered with Google to create a website to answer your questions about the Syrian war and how terrible it is, although it stopped short of revealing the real causes of the conflict. It's just another propaganda platform. Propaganda is big business in the United States. They don't call it that. They call it public relations. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Joseph in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, the attack in Manchester, everybody knows basically who it, well, not everyone, well, most of the people on this radio know that everybody, it benefits only one person. It doesn't benefit the West going in there and sending more troops to go look for ISIS. We all know that. But what I think very few people realize is that how does Israel, especially, how does it keep getting what it wants, even though it seems like the West has somehow got it on the
Okay, you got about a minute left. You got about a minute left. You need to basically get to the point.
Okay. Israel is basically a powerhouse in the tech industry, right?
Yeah, it is. And Joseph, I apologize. I misestimated the time. And you need to really plan ahead of time what you're going to say when you call on in so that you can sort of get it out in a concise fashion. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2. We're going to go ahead and close the phone lines because I'm falling way behind on my talking points. And, of course, in our third hour, we're going to have Ellen Brown. So I got a bunch of stuff I need to get through here. Apparently, Turkey is getting ready to form a 10,000-fighter army to battle the Kurdish forces in northern Syria. And, of course, this is becoming a very unstable situation because Syria has not allowed Turkey to operate on their territory. Of course, then Syria has not allowed the United States either, didn't stop them. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence is out there saying that Kurdish independence is inevitable. We will prevail. We will carve off chunks of all these other countries and we'll create a new nation right there where we want it to be. So, let's see. America's arming the Kurds and the terrorists. The Turks are bombing the Kurds, and they assist the terrorists. And it's getting hard to find out whose side everybody is on. It's a very, very complicated situation to keep worked out here. The Pentagon is asking for another $262 million to hasten the training of anti-Daesh forces in Iraq and Syria. So again, on one side, ISIS is working for us. On the other, it's working against us. It really is a Gordian knot of trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Who's on whose side? What's really going on out there? Let's see. U.S.-led coalition trains the police for Raqqa once the Islamic State is driven out. And they're celebrating how they've created a new civilian police force, U.S.-trained. Which is interesting because normally that would be considered the function of the Syrian government to be training the civil police. And in any event, it looks like the Syrian government may be in Raqqa by the weekend. And these new U.S.-trained police will have to make a decision whether to obey their U.S. trainers or to basically slide on over to Syria's legitimate government. Now, up in Ukraine, apparently they have decided to breach the embargo on South Sudan, and apparently they are now supplying the country with weapons and basically fueling the humanitarian crisis in the process. In case you didn't know it, there's another one of these botched interventions going on down in Sudan, South Sudan. A senior Iranian official, Ali Shamkhani, speaking at the reporters at his arrival at the Russian capital Moscow, is saying that all of these petrodollars are turning the Middle East into the West's arms depot. And in response, of course, to this huge, huge arms deal with Saudi Arabia that Donald Trump is out there promoting. And it's kind of interesting where you have the gun grabbers in this country want to shut down the manufacturers of civilian weapons, saying that, well, if the civilian weapons are out there, then gun crime inevitably is going to go up, which is not always true. And yet here, it's okay for the military weapons. Yeah, we'll sell them everywhere, and if a war breaks out, it's not our responsibility. We just sold the tools. That's all here. Ron Paul is out there saying that, yes, in point of fact, Iran is now in the crosshairs, Saudi Arabia as the U.S. proxy. And he says, unfortunately, sadly, the neocons are still writing the script for the U.S. government. And unfortunately, Donald Trump is going along with it, for which we are all very, very disappointed. Now, here's an interesting story, and they're making a little bit of a big deal out of it. It's over in the Daily Mail. The U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis apparently was not consulted by the generals who dropped that mother of all bombs. Apparently, he was caught by surprise that it was used, And it probably shouldn't have been, because witnesses on the ground are saying it's nowhere near as powerful as claimed. But technically, yes, lower-level generals can deploy whatever non-nuclear weapons they want to do. But it seems like there may be some issues with the chain of command, and that more and more we're seeing the Pentagon itself act independently of the chain of command, of the Secretary of Defense and of the President. Now, up in Afghanistan, one of the big reasons for all this new talk about a new U.S. escalation in Afghanistan is the claim that Russia is arming the Taliban. We can't settle down Afghanistan because Russia's arming the Taliban. They're coming back in. It's their revenge for the U.S. driving them out of Afghanistan back when. Unfortunately, like so many other headline-grabbing allegations, there's no support for it. And apparently the Defense Intelligence Agency has finally stepped forward and admitted to the Senate there is no physical evidence that Russia is giving arms to the Taliban. It's just another big, fat, war-starting lie. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, over in the Middle East, Donald Trump has been making a lot of news, a lot of headlines here, trying to apply the art of the deal in the Middle East. He's selling wars and terrorism. And a lot of people are very, very critical with it. That he's out there talking about peace, at the same time he's selling the machinery for war on a vast scale. And Trump's style, his throwaway comments during his campaign, were very entertaining. But apparently now that he's president, it's being seen quite critically by the corporate media. And by the way, yes, 80% of the corporate media coverage on Donald Trump is negative. They've been keeping count. The corporate media does not want Trump to be there. It's hard to say they're just carrying a grudge from Hillary's loss, or they may very seriously be trying to lay the foundation for Trump to be a single-term president in 2020. But one thing is very obvious to anybody looking at the corporate media, especially this slapdown of Sean Hannity. The corporate media has a bias, it has an agenda, and it's not keeping the public fully informed. Now, meanwhile, Rand Paul is planning to get a vote in the U.S. Senate opposing this Saudi weapons deal, because a lot of people are very unhappy with it over the fact that Saudi Arabia doesn't really have a good human rights record. Saudi Arabia has been committing humanitarian disaster in Yemen. And it is another case of a flip-flop, because it wasn't all that long ago that Donald Trump claimed that Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11. Now, maybe when he was over there in Israel, Netanyahu whispered in his ear, actually, we did it, so you can go ahead and sell the weapons to Saudi Arabia. But it is a rather strange accommodation. Now, as you know, they're talking about an Arab NATO, a unified Middle Eastern military cooperation, if you will. And basically, Peter Ford, the former British ambassador to Syria and Bahrain, is saying it's a myth. It's not going to happen. He says the Saudis and the Emirates would never dare put their troops onto a battlefield in Syria or Iraq out of fear their troops would mutiny and join ISIS. Apparently things aren't all that stable in those countries either, and their military is having problems with their leadership. Now, Robert Fisk, who's an English writer, journalist, has come on out and said the reality is it's Saudi Arabia and not Iran that is the fountainhead of terrorism. Now, I think his list is a little bit narrow. We know that the U.S. sponsors terrorism. We know George Soros sponsors terrorism. We know that Israel's behind much of the terrorism we see in the world. But when the U.S. wants to invade a country, it starts this campaign of propaganda. They abuse human rights. They're anti-Semitic. They support terror. They have nuclear weapons. They have poison gas. And just down this laundry list of all the things until finally everybody says, oh, it's such a horrible place. Of course we have a right to wipe them off. But we've heard it so many times, it really isn't getting a lot of traction. And I'm sure that the internal polling is showing that. The American people just aren't buying this stuff anymore. We've heard it too many times before. And it turned out to be a lie. Now, over in carbonated TV, they're making a point that Trump's Israel peace message is useless as long as we go on giving Israel weapons, because of Israel's long track record of aggressions against its neighbors. And apparently, this is over at Blacklisted News, Russian journalist is asking a question that a lot of people have been asking. Why doesn't ISIS ever attack or threaten Israel? And, of course, Assad is out there saying that it is Israel supporting all the terrorists in the region. Very complex situation. Now then, over in the Philippines, in the city of Marawi, apparently ISIS is trying to take control of the city. Duterte's had to declare a national emergency and martial law, and the latest story is that ISIS may have succeeded in taking over that city. There's almost no mention of it going on in the media. Is this another U.S.-backed coup d'etat? Was the U.S. using ISIS in the Philippines the same way they were using it in Syria to take out Duterte because of his crackdown on the drug trade in that country? Because remember, the U.S. and the Philippines, they were all friends, everybody's all hugging each other, and we're all good. And then all of a sudden, Duterte looks at just how out of control the drug problem is in his country, and he starts a very harsh crackdown on the drug dealers. And remember, Obama went on over there and said, no, you can't do that. And in a single stroke, just absolutely destroyed the friendly relations between the Philippines and the United States. And now we have ISIS is over there trying to take over the country. It's things like this that lead us to describe the U.S. government as a narcocracy. In other words, the drug trade, the CIA drug trade, is the primary driving force of everything that's going on. I'm very alarmed at how much I'm hearing about the summer of rage, of riots, of revolution, of civil war. And those are things that I have been trying to find a way to avoid for going on 20 years. It is starting to look like it's inevitable, and we should all be making the appropriate precautions to protect ourselves and our loved ones. But it does seem that the U.S. government long ago passed the point where there was any hope of redemption, of a return to the Republic, and it does seem irretrievable at this point. And it's a very, very sad thing to be here. All right, let's turn to the economic news. Apparently, the latest bailout for Greece has failed. And as a result of that, Greece is now looking at a default. Athens is on the verge of going into bankruptcy, and apparently this will actually take them out of the European Union. And we knew this was going to come sooner or later because the last several bailouts for Greece were simply loans to help them to pay back the earlier loans. None of that money went to benefit the people of Greece. The people of Greece are being looted and plundered to please the bankers. And they will do it to every country that they get their hands on. We're seeing it down in Venezuela. We saw it in Cyprus. We're seeing it here in the streets of America. They literally are addicts to money, addicts to wealth. And even worse, they cannot feel that they are wealthy unless they look out the windows of their palaces and see that everybody else is poor. And they wield so much power over the rest of us through those private central banks. And apparently, even in the European Parliament, some of the members of the Parliament are saying this has gone on too far with Greece. And they're lashing out at Germany's finance minister over his obsession with more austerity on the people of Greece. And they're saying Greece has been destroyed by all these cuts to pensions and public spending, and it's suffering under a debt burden it cannot ever pay off. And that is exactly what's happening. Now, meanwhile, in the world of Bitcoin, Bitcoin has gone above $2,400 after the China downgrade. Moody's has downgraded China's rating from A1 to AA3 over their slowing economy and growing debt. And that shot Bitcoin up even higher. And I think I'm joining a lot of people in concern that it is in a bubble. And so if you want to get in and ride it for a little way and get out, but if you get on in and you expect it's just going to keep going on up forever, it isn't. At some point there will be a correction. There has to be. It's the way these dynamics work. As I said before, Moody's has downgraded China from an A1 to an AA3 over concerns of their slowing economy and growing debt. And the outlook is basically from stable. I'm sorry. They're citing concerns to support growth, and it's supporting debt growth across the economy. Let's see. All right, let me go back on that one here. Basically, some of the things that are happening in China are a cause of concern. And China is in the process of trying to deleverage some of their exposure. It's cutting into the bank's profit margins. And apparently, interbank credit risk concerns have pushed the bank's cost of borrowing beyond the rate they charge their customers for loans for the first time in history. In other words, when the Chinese banks are making a loan, they're actually losing money because they're having to pay more for that money they're loaning out than they are getting from the customers. And that's a very, very troubling sign. Over at Marks & Spencer, their profits have tumbled 64%. It's another sign of the retail Mageddon. Here in Hawaii, we've been talking about how consumer debt is skyrocketing. 1/4 of American people cannot meet their month-to-month bills. They're being forced to rely on their credit cards, going deeper and deeper into debt, which, of course, central banks love. The more debt, the longer they can keep the Ponzi scheme going. But it is at record highs, 2008 highs. And apparently, because of our high cost of living here in Hawaii, we have the second highest consumer debt per person in the nation. And it is out of control. It is out of control. There's really only one way to solve it. Well, there's two ways. The first way is just let it all collapse. The second way is we need a jubilee. We need a reset. Just write off all the debts and say we're starting from scratch right now, and the economies will take off. But it is that huge and growing unstoppable debt and its awareness that is taking all these economies down. And the reason is because lying at the heart of the private central banks is that deep, dark secret that by design, private central banks create more debt than money with which to pay the debt. They use that awareness of debt to control nations and their people. And the debt will grow and grow and grow. It doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you sacrifice. Look at what's going on in Greece. Eventually, the debt crashes the system. Now, over in Europe, talking about the refugee crisis, Poland is standing up to this open border situation, saying, Germany created this mess. Let Germany deal with it. And stop compelling all the European countries to take in these refugees that are causing such problems. Brussels, meanwhile, is out there literally talking about charging Poland thousands of euros for every refused refugee. Just pushing that globalist agenda. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about immigration, refugee problem. And apparently, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, he's now doing his impersonation of Bill Gates. He's using his wealth and his influence, his power, to place himself on the global stage, deciding what is best for the rest of us. And apparently his Open Borders group is out there saying that enforcing immigration law hurts public safety. And this is a talking point that we have heard from several people, the pro-immigration, pro-refugee, pro-open border people. They can't actually document that is the case, that enforcing immigration law somehow is a threat to public safety. Not enforcing immigration law seems to be the bigger threat when you look at the crime spree that is going across Europe right now. Sweden was finally forced to admit that right now 90% of all their gun shootings are being done by the refugees. They've got an out-of-control rape epidemic going on. These are all threats to public safety. But all these big money junkies, George Soros and now Zuckerberg, they all want a single global government. And of course, basically Zuckerberg is positioning Facebook to be the social media for the entire world. It will be mandated. You will use Facebook to communicate with each other. Now, a little bit of good news. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is now demanding that so-called sanctuary cities who are dropping that label to preserve their federal funding. He's saying dropping the label is not enough. You must prove, you must document that you are now complying with federal immigration law. And I think that's a really good step to do, because it's very easy for a governor or a mayor to say, all right, we're not a sanctuary city anymore, and then go on basically interfering with immigration enforcement. So that's a good thing to do. Now, this is out of Portland, and it's weird. It's just a weird story. Apparently, there was a burrito shop owned by a white woman, and it's been forced to close under the accusation of cultural appropriation. In other words, along with all these other attacks on white people and everything, the idea now is that Mexican restaurants should only be owned by Mexicans, Chinese restaurants should only be owned and operated by Chinese, and so forth. Try and create this idea that some of these refugees will now have business opportunities because they're going to set up these various retail-themed restaurants that are now being denied to the indigenous population. But, I mean, this is political correctness run absolutely wild. This idea that a white person can't, just for the heck of it, have a French pastry shop or a Chinese restaurant or a Mexican food place or a Thai restaurant. That really is way, way over the top. And it is discrimination. It is discrimination. And by the way, it doesn't always work out. Many, many years ago, I was in Milan with my first wife, and despite being surrounded by world-class Italian restaurants, she wanted Chinese food. So we hunted down a Chinese restaurant in Milan, being run by some Chinese, and it was the worst Chinese food I'd ever had in my life. So a little bit of a warning about this idea of cultural appropriation. This is a very, very tragic story. And we're going to go ahead and open the lines for the rest of this half hour until Ellen Brown comes on. Apparently, there was the 16-year-old student, Corey Walgren, and he was a junior at Naperville North High School in Naperville, Illinois. Normal, social, good-looking kid, honor roll student looking to attend a Big Ten college. And I'll tell you what happened to him when we come back from this commercial break. It's a tragedy. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this story. 16-year-old Corey Walgren junior at Naperville North High School in Naperville, Illinois. Perfectly normal kid, honor roll student, ready to go to college. And apparently he had made a cell phone video of himself having sex with a female classmate. The rumor then got out that he had showed the video to a third party. They cannot confirm that he actually did that. It was only a rumor. But they dragged him on in and said he was now guilty of the production and distribution of child pornography. And the kid basically walked on out, walked up to a parking structure, and jumped off. Now, obviously, I don't like the idea of child pornography, but in this case, we're talking about kids having sex, playing with a camera, and there's nothing new with that. That was one of the big reasons the Polaroid camera took off the way it did when it first came on out. You didn't have to risk sending your film off to the photo lab at the drugstore. And I think there needs to be an allowance made because kids do have sex and they like to play with their toys. And they just destroyed this young kid's life and he killed himself. And that tells us that the system is seriously out of whack. It really is. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. Miroslav in London, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. I want to ask about a few things, and I have a bit of a comment. Now, this guy who resolved the issue with malware a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Now, the question is, where did he got the malware?
Well, if you're a security researcher, there are security companies that will actually capture a specimen of the malware, and then they'll basically have it available to look at in a form that is not going to infect your system. Usually what they'll do is a disassembly on the code so that it's no longer an executable, or there'll be other protections. But security researchers do pass these malwares back and forth amongst each other to just try and stay on top of the problem.
Right. So why wasn't the person who made the malware, why did he then buy the domain? So he could have bought the domain with bitcoins and then not register it. I mean, register it, but not put the record.
Because the instant you register a domain, it's going to show up in the DNS, even if it's just pointing back to the domain registration company. And that domain was inside the WannaCry ransomware, apparently as a kill switch, and that was the mechanism. I understand that, but then it could have checked where it points to. So, because I've been working with software for many years, and that just sounds a little bit strange. It was just a comment, but that's a flying thing. I have other questions for you. Okay.
If you don't mind. So now, a bit of comment. I created the software some time ago, and I sent it to various companies to try to advertise it, and for which I think it would be helpful. And it turns out people are afraid to try, just because of malware, and it's perfectly excellent software in my opinion, but people are afraid to try it. So how would you go about, if you have any ideas, how to kind of tell people how to put any kind of trust so that people will try it and see if it works for them?
Well, there is a system you can get on computers. It's called a sandbox. It's a virtual machine that operates in a walled-off area of memory and is unable, anything running in the sandbox is unable to communicate with anything outside the sandbox, and that's one way to do it. Many companies that deal with software submissions actually have a separate air-gapped computer. It's not on their internal LAN, and they will run things on that. Now, depending upon what your software does, rather than simply send them the software, if they're close to you, is to arrange a visit where you come on in with a laptop that is running the product you are attempting to sell and demonstrate it to them. Because if they decide they want to buy your software, obviously they will be buying the source code, and they will then be able to verify that there is no malware inside it.
Right. So there isn't easy way to. I mean, I thought so, but I thought to ask you. There isn't an easy way to send them things and impute some kind of a trust, so they would, a marketing employee would try. There isn't an easy way.
Well, again,
right.
you need to connect with somebody at the company who is sophisticated enough in computers to understand virtual machines and sandboxes, because that is really the best way to go. And yeah, right now, unfortunately, because of all the malware and the ransomware, companies are instituting policies. You will not install anything or run anything on this machine other than what's work-related, and it is, unfortunately, an impediment for small-scale software developers, because much of these ransomware companies, malware companies, they have legitimate business fronts. And many years ago, we got burned when we had what appeared to be a legitimate company wanted to place an ad on our website that involved a flash animation, and it turned out the flash animation was putting out malware, and we had to disconnect from them. And that's why, as far as the What Really Happened website itself, we do not allow flash animation of any kind. It's a huge security problem. I don't know why people are still using it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I have one more thing. So a couple of days ago, because when I received the feedback from people that they're just afraid to try the software and there is no way I can persuade them to do that, what I did was I opened, I took a piece of another software of mine, and what I did, I checked the digital signature. It is fine. So then I went and corrupted it, and I checked the digital signature with properties window, and it is now corrupted. It says it is not, but the software is run easily. So just click it and Windows starts it. And my question for Microsoft is why they don't check that the digital signature of software is corrupted. If they would just check that the digital signature of software is corrupted, then they not start the software, or not start not digitally signed software, or start non-digitally signed software after several warning screens, then most of the malware goes killed.
Well, if you're looking at a corrupted digital signature, you ought to be suspicious, because it is not uncommon for cyber criminals to take a legitimate piece of software and add their malware into it and then forward it along. It's called a man-in-the-middle attack,
right.
And
right.
you should be very, very concerned about that. And that's why I was telling people, allow me to finish, please, and then we're going to let you go.
Yeah, sorry.
You should never download patches or drivers or updates to software from anybody but the original source website. These websites that are out there saying, come here, we've got all the drivers you could ever need, we'll scan your machine for free and upload the drivers, very often those are used as vectors for malware attacks. I think that you need to consult somebody who is far more expert in the field of software sales to corporations than I am, because I'm not an expert in that field. Okay?
You didn't get. Sorry, I'm sorry. You didn't get me. My last question. What I'm saying is that there is an easy solution for all malware. That's what I'm saying. If Microsoft would just not start corrupted digital software with corrupted digital signatures, then malware goes dead. Because to get a digital signature, you have to register with a signing company, and they know who you are. You have to pay them. They know your bank details. So if somebody signs a software, then they very well know who they are. So proper malware wouldn't be signed, because if they signed, everybody knows who they are. And if Microsoft just checks which software is not signed and it doesn't start non-signed software, and doesn't start software with corrupted signatures, then there is no room for malware.
Well, it sounds like a good idea, but there have already been several cases where attempts at digital signatures or even the certificates for websites have been compromised and forged successfully. So it sounds good in theory. I don't know that it could be made to work. Anyway, Miroslav, I'm running out of time. I need to let you go, and we're going to switch over. We're going to switch to Jeff in St. Paul. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, talking about cultural appropriations, I'm a cab driver, Irish heritage, and about 10 years ago, my sister works in a deli that has a partnership with a Chinese food chain, so they lease a little space for their woks and refrigerators, and they have a little display case. Christmas week, one of the cooks just takes off his apron, hands it to the boss, and walks out. So the guy says to my sister, "Where am I going to find a wok cook on Christmas week?" And my sister says, "Well, my brother's a cab driver. If you call him, he'll come in and try to help." So they call me. I come in, learn how to be a wok cook, right?
Yes.
And I did good. It's a great way to cook. Well, after a year or so, I went and applied at a Chinese restaurant, and they refused to hire me because I wasn't Chinese. I says, "Can I come back and show you how I can do all your recipes? I already know them. I can know them by heart." No. And so maybe I need to start a place called the Irish Wok.
That would actually fly. That would actually fly. You actually would have had a case of job discrimination on the basis of race, but again, we don't know what the rules are anymore. This idea of cultural appropriation is now permitted to discriminate on the basis of race. Boy, what a major setback for social progress in this country. Anyway, Jeff.
Now, like watching your show. Okay, like this afternoon, it ran for half an hour on my iPad, and then it stopped, and I reloaded it, and the video was Morris 108, and then it ran for another half hour, and it was Katy Perry on the video instead of you. So someone's messing with you.
Are you talking about BAM user, or where are you trying to watch it?
Well, what really happened? And I placed for about a half hour, and then it crashes, and then I load it up, and there's another video on the screen.
Okay. Yeah, well, we are getting messed with on a major basis, and I found in Pride Loose one real major headache earlier today. It's why I was a little less than prepared for the show, and I got to look for another one after the show is over. And it really is it's out of control. The cybercrime problem is totally out of control. Anyway, Jeff, running out of time. I got to let you go.
Talk to you later.
Nico in Southern California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, nui nui.
Aloha, nui nui.
So, on cultural appropriation, my family is Italian. We actually had a very well-known Italian restaurant in Southern California for many years. Presidents, actors, the Rat Pack, they all came in,
What was it called?
I just think that it's ridiculous. It was called, it's called Petrocello's.
Oh, I think I remember that.
Yeah, that's my family's restaurant. It closed in 1997.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so and then it was out towards Riverside. There it was, it's got a really good story to it, but the reason for calling is that, I don't know, since as long as I could remember, we had a very broad spectrum of nationalities working in the kitchen. A lot of it would be your typical Southern California workers, say, probably Mexican or from south of the border. And I just think that if they really wanted to push cultural appropriation and only certain kind of people can make only certain kind of food, I think like every restaurant in the country would have to shut down. Quite frankly, I think it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I absolutely agree. Anyway, Nico, got to let you go. Running out of time. We're going to take one more phone call, then close the lines, try and get some news before Ellen Brown joins us. Alex in San Antonio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling because I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the perceived bubble that I think Bitcoin is in. I'm not sure if you're familiar with how it works, but I know at one point you said it could have been a way to create a key, but there's a blockage in the blockchain. It's literally like an impasse, and there's about 150,000 transactions that are clogged right now, and which means that if there's a pullback, people won't be able to get out of their money because they won't be able to transact. And it's one of the drawbacks that these cryptocurrencies have, because their mercantile exchange is not that huge yet.
Yes.
It is growing exponentially every day, but it's not at a point where you can trade with it like you would with regular currency, simply because the market for it isn't there yet. But it is going to grow, and it is here to stay. There's just going to be. I'm just advising people because I've been in Bitcoin since it crashed to zero, and I left $5 in there just because I wanted to be cheap. I never knew I would eventually have, a good amount of money built up in Bitcoin. But now that I'm transacting in it and have a coin account, I'm finding that it is very difficult to get out of your position. Like, let's say, someone just asked me for a loan, and I wanted to help them, so I wanted to sell off some of my position, and I literally found myself not being able to. So I would urge caution to a lot of people that are watching this thing go up meteorically. It's gonna come back down the same way. Because even if you wanted to transact right now and get out of it, you really can't unless you found someone to give you actual cash for a USB or a memory card.
Yeah, that's one of the areas where the interface with the regular economy is still not well developed. I had a situation a while ago where a competing cryptocurrency was trying to get me on board promoting their particular product, and I was starting to learn how cryptocurrencies work, because I'm not an expert on that, most assuredly. But unfortunately, Hawaii outlawed that particular cryptocurrency, and so I got back out of it. I know it's a tremendous potential. My concern is ultimately that somehow the owners of the private central banks are going to find a way to own the cryptocurrencies as well and use them to their nefarious purposes, maybe even as an entree to the cashless society in place of the U.S. dollar. All right, Alex, going to let you go. Okay, got to let you go. Got to do a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And speaking of computers and encryption and everything, there is a decryptor for the WannaCry worm that is still out there. Now, the first version has pretty much stopped propagating because of that very clever gentleman in London finding the kill switch domain and registering it so it's on DNS. And the way the first version of WannaCry would work is when it infected a machine, it would go on out over the net and see if the domain existed, and if the domain did not exist, would continue to propagate itself. The second version, the kill switch didn't really kill it, but slowed it down. Unfortunately, now there's a third version out where there does not appear to be a kill switch at all. So apparently, French security researchers Benjamin Delpy, Adrien Guinet, and Matt Sushi put together a ransomware decryptor that works on XP 7 and Windows 2003. We have a link to it on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. The only problem is, we mentioned this before, it recovers the encryption key from memory inside the Windows standard encryption interface, which is something that WannaCry cannot delete once it's done encrypting your files. It deletes the key it's using internally, but the key is still inside the Windows encryption infrastructure. And this tool will find it and decrypt all your files. But again, the problem is, if the memory has been overwritten or you've rebooted the system, it is all over and done with on this situation. And it really is, it's an out-of-control problem. And for some reason, the governments of the world don't seem to be concerned about it. Well, Russia is. Russia's arresting hackers left and right over there. There is another aspect to all of this you need to be aware of, and that is, of course, the threat from WannaCry has spawned yet another surge of scammers that are out there saying, we will protect your system from WannaCry, or we will remove it. And apparently the police have issued a warning over fake support scams that are using WannaCry to scare PC users into paying up. Coming from ZDNet. And finally, I've been talking about the problem with online advertising becoming abusive, aggressive, being used to serve up malware. It's a constant headache for us over here at whatreallyhappened.com. And according to this article over at The Verge, 1 in 5 ad-serving websites are using fraud bots to run up their clicks to defraud their advertisers. And this is a new report from White Ops, and basically saying that people will set up these online advertising companies. Apparently it focuses more on the advertisers who serve video, and then they'll set up web bots that will visit the ads over and over again to run up the click count and defraud their advertisers. And they're saying that roughly 20% of the online advertising industry is engaging in this fraud. You know, if I did not have this strong moral, ethical sense, I could be very rich right now. All right, we're going to take a break here. We're going to come back with Ellen Brown talking about the economy, talking about banking, talking about, well, whatever she wants to talk about, because she has got a lot to say. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. Our phone lines are closed for this hour. Joining us on the phone right now is Ellen Brown. She is an economic banking expert. She's done a lot of writing, been a huge admirer of this person for a long, long time. Ellen, thank you for spending time with us today.
Thanks, Michael. I've been an admirer of yours as well.
Oh, well, that's always good to hear. I wanted to get you on the show here to talk about things like the feasibility of Trump's infrastructure plan, and you had written an article about it saying that if Trump were to handle the infrastructure the way other countries have done, that it could actually cost 50% less than the usual method of borrowing money from the banks and then paying it back with interest. Do you want to expand on that, please?
Yeah, well, China, for example, has built 12,000 miles of high-speed rail, and just in the last 10 years, which is basically during the time that we've been talking about it. And how do they do it? They fund it through, they own, I think, 80% of their banks. They used to own, or the state, the government used to own all their banks, but I think they're down to 80% now. But they own the big banks, the infrastructure bank and the central bank and so forth. And so they can borrow directly from their banks, which they own, and they get the interest, which is 50% of the cost of infrastructure on average in the U.S. over a long-term loan. So basically they get their loans for interest-free, cutting the cost in half, and then they can just build they're basically drawing on their own credit and can build whatever they decide to build, and the profits from these high-speed rail pays those loans back. But the trick, the secret to banking is that all banks just create the money they lend on their books. That used to be considered conspiracy theory, but now the Bank of England has acknowledged it, and the Bundesbank has acknowledged it. The Bundesbank just in April. The Bank of England, I think in 2014, said in their quarterly report, they said, contrary to popular belief, banks do not lend their deposits. They actually create deposits when they make loans. And, said the bank, 97% of the money supply, that would be the UK money supply, is created in this way. And the US money supply is basically the same. So if you own the bank, and the bank just issues that credit on its books, then basically the whole thing is free to you. I mean, in order to balance their books, when they joined the World Trade Organization, they had to agree to balance their books. So you have to theoretically get that money back, but obviously you don't have a lot of downside if you created it in the first place. And your own central bank has the power to money.
Well, and the problem is that those who borrow the money are not free to simply create the money out of thin air to make the loan repayment. And, of course, there is that interest, which is money that never really existed in the first place, if you think about it. And that's why this system of banking is such a trap, because by design it creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt. But getting on back to the infrastructure, especially as it regards what Donald Trump wants to do. The way China does it, the loans do technically accrue interest, but that interest goes back to the government of China. And so basically they're getting their infrastructure funded for zero interest. They're basically just borrowing and repaying the cost of the infrastructure itself and nothing else over and above it. Now, Canada used to have that system, because the charter for the Bank of Canada, and the Bank of Canada is rather unique in that it is owned by the people of Canada. But the Charter for the Bank of Canada declared that loans for government infrastructure development would be interest-free, but unfortunately, that went away a while ago, and I think this had something to do with joining the World Trade Organization, where the Government of Canada now goes to ordinary banks to borrow money for infrastructure that charge interest and then makes the Canadian people pay for that interest, even though interest-free loans are technically available from the Bank of Canada. And there was this lawsuit, the name of it is eluding me at the moment, that they were trying to basically go back to that system.
Mm-hmm. It's brought by the COMER, which is the Committee for Monetary and Economic Reform. In 1974, as they allege, and I think they're right, I've written this too, in 1974, Canada joined the Basel Committee, which was part of the Bank for International Settlements. And the new rules under the Basel Committee, that was when we had stagflation going on, and this was blamed on governments printing money or borrowing from their own central banks, which created the money. So it was based on Milton Friedman's argument that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, which it isn't. I mean, he was saying that if you have inflation, it's always because the money supply has increased, but that's not true. At that time, there were other reasons why we had inflation. One was that Henry Kissinger apparently had negotiated a secret deal with the OPEC countries to sell their oil only in dollars, and Kissinger said, we will make you very rich. We are going to quadruple the price of oil. But in return, you will sell your oil only in U.S. dollars, and we will protect you militarily, protect the ruling families. So that was the beginning of, that was after U.S. had gone off the gold standard internationally when, in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window and said, we're out, we've run out of gold, so no longer will your dollars be redeemable in gold. So the dollar plunged, and in order to regain its global reserve status, our State Department devised this plan to back it with oil, essentially.
Yes, the petrodollar deal. So that
quadrupled the price of oil. Sorry?
I said the petrodollar deal, and they're still continuing that today. They're trying to make sure that all natural resources are traded only for U.S. dollars, because without that, there isn't a whole heck of a lot left holding our economy up.
Well, yes, but I don't think that can be. I mean, obviously, the Chinese are selling the Chinese and the Russians are negotiating, et cetera. I don't think they can maintain that anymore. So that quadrupled the price of oil globally. And the countries that didn't have their own oil then had to borrow. So, of course, they had to borrow from U.S. banks because they needed U.S. dollars in order to buy their oil. So that drove up the price of everything. If the price of oil goes way up, that drives up prices and puts all these countries in debt. So that was one thing that caused inflation. Another was that labor was very strong then, and so the labor unions were demanding more wages, and that drove up the cost. And then the central banks preemptively trying to bring down inflation, raised interest rates. In 1980, Paul Volcker raised interest rates to 20%. So this is another cost of doing business. So that clearly would, it stopped the borrowing, which is what he intended to do, but it also drove up prices in the sense that, it would drive up the cost of manufacturing things.
Yeah,
so anyway,
it does seem, pardon me for interrupting, and first of all, I have to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and our guest today is Ellen Brown. We're talking about banking, the economics of infrastructure development. We're going to be hitting a lot of other topics later in the hour. It is rather amazing when you look at modern commerce. It isn't just person with money trades money to person with product. It seems like credit lines and banking, are just insinuated into every possible aspect of commerce between any two parties, and of course they're siphoning off a huge amount of the wealth generated by that commerce.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're at to change the subject. I think we're at a cusp where that's all going to change, because with the development of these new financial technologies, blockchain specifically, you can make loans for free. You can do transactions for free. I mean, we don't really need those middlemen anymore. That's what I'm just now writing about, a banking revolution where we can be our own bankers. Once you understand that banks create the money they lend, then we could basically be creating our own money. Well, this is a pretty complicated subject, but anyway, using smart contracts, which are baked right into the blockchain. So I think banks may be losing their hold, but I agree that up till now, there was German research showing that 40% of the cost of everything, on average, is interest. Even though you think, well, I didn't borrow anything to buy that, but to make the product all along the chain of production, all these little producers pay on credit. They pay their workers before they have a product to sell. So they have all these costs. So they have a credit line, and then they borrow that money, and then they have to pay it back like 90 days net after the product sells. So you have all these little producers adding their interest onto the ultimate price tag.
Boy, I didn't even realize it was that high. 40%. That is astounding.
Yeah.
So
that and you can see that where we've got this we've got basically two economies growing. I mean, there is a theory that there's a debt virus theory that the problem with the system is that all money is created at interest, and the interest isn't created in the original loan, and mathematically this is not sustainable. And I actually subscribe to that theory, but I get all kinds of pushback from people who say, well, you're not taking into account the velocity of money, that it's paid back monthly, and if the lender pays the money back into the market, he hires the borrowers to scrub his floors. It can work out mathematically. That's true. But the banks don't hire people to scrub their floors. I mean, that's what we're talking about in public banking, where you would put all the money back into the economy for the benefit of the people. But the way it is now, the lenders save the money and reinvest it. So it's just this huge parasitic system, financialized system, where they're gambling with the money. I mean, it grows and grows and grows exponentially on the financialized side. And on the physical side, where productivity happens, it can only grow linearly. I mean, that's the nature of nature. That's the nature of the physical world.
True. That
you can only build things one at a time. So it's a mathematical impossibility, and you can see that now that's what's clearly happening, because there's such a great divide now between the rich and the poor, where the upper, handful of families owns as much as half the world.
Everybody else, yeah. Well, I mean, it all really comes down to the fact that when you have a bank that is literally inventing money out of thin air, the instant they loan that first pretty printed piece of paper into circulation, more money is owed to that bank than actually exists. And that is really the root cause of why the debt continues to get out of control, why no matter how hard you work or how much you sacrifice, the debt can never be repaid. We're seeing that happen now in Greece. We're seeing it. We saw it happen in Cyprus. It's starting to happen all over the world, simply because, as you say, the productivity is linear, and the more and more people are struggling with these bank-created debts, they have less and less with which to power the commerce. And we're seeing it with the harm to the retail sector of our economy. Prior to the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown, roughly 60% of the U.S. economy was consumer spending. And that has now evaporated, and we're seeing iconic American retailers start to close their doors. Sears is about to go. Radio Shack is on the verge of going. Every day when I do this show, there's another retailer that has closed their doors. The shopping mall we have down here at the bottom of this hill on Oahu, they've got huge numbers of vacancies. And I admire the courage of people who will go on in there and try and start a business. But you look at some of them and you say, this is a business that would do well in good economic times, but they don't have a chance of surviving now. When you have all the money concentrated up at the very top, the economy locks up. To have the economy working healthy, there's got to be a recycling machine that takes some of that wealth from the very top, pumps it back down to the bottom, so that workers, middle-class people can trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, and then pump that money back on in. To go to the malls and buy things, to go buy new cars, to go buy big screen TVs and keep the system going. But unfortunately, our system has evolved away from capitalism years ago, and it is now very heavily fascistic. And it is literally designed where all the real wealth is being drawn up to the very, very top and not allowed to come on back down for commerce, for rebuilding. And we're seeing the effects every day. But unfortunately, the people who own these banks, the people who are at the top of these financial corporations, they're money junkies. They're literally addicted to wealth. No matter how much they make, it's not going to be enough. They need that rush the next day. And like addicts of cocaine or heroin or meth or anything else, they literally are oblivious to the damage their addiction is doing to those around them. And that is really a big part of the problem we're dealing with.
Right, and that's basically what public banking is all about. It's basically the Chinese model, where you would put all the profits back into the system. I mean, basically they go to the taxpayers, and then they are spent on things that the taxpayers want to need, theoretically. I mean, I know in our current system, because it's so captured by big money, taxes don't seem to go into what we want and need. They go into wars abroad.
Yeah, wars. Yeah. And Israel and all this other stuff. It is amazing. But when our country first started, I mean, we fought the revolution to break free of a private central bank, the Bank of England. And the nation started with a very simple economic model that I think is very close to what is being proposed by the public banking movement. And that was that in the case of the Founding Fathers, the government created the money, spent it into circulation, interest-free. It flowed through commerce without accruing interest, and then was simply taxed back at the end of the cycle in the exact same amount to balance the books and close the whole thing off. And it's a stable system, and it worked for the country, and it worked for, more importantly, the people of the country. And almost immediately, those private central banking families in Europe came on in and said, we can't let that stick around. People will get bad ideas about running the economy. And so we had the first and second banks of the United States, and now we've got the Federal Reserve.
Agreed. Well, you do hear people say that the problem with the government-issued currency was that it did inflate in the northern colonies, and that was allegedly King George's reason for saying that the colonies couldn't print their own money, their own paper script. But the reason it inflated was that it was a lot easier then to issue the money. I mean, it was very difficult to figure out. You say, like, bring it all back in taxes or bring it back a proportionate amount in taxes. But then you had all these frontiersmen, and, you didn't have this kind of bookkeeping that you have today where you could track people down. So it was very hard to get it back in the form of taxes. But today, it would actually be possible you could just shave it right off every transaction. I've heard these proposals for a financial transaction tax, where the tax would come right off the trade. In other words, you don't even have to send it in as income taxes. It's just, say these 0.1% financial transaction tax proposals. So it's just a little tiny shave, not like 10%, which is what we pay in sales taxes, but just a little tiny shave off of every trade, including all stock trades, all high-frequency program trading, all derivatives, all those money-making money things, which are currently untaxed, and are sales, just like the sales of products. They call them products. They
Yes.
call derivatives financial products. Why aren't they taxed as if they were products?
Well, again, because we've gone down the road to economic fascism, where the tax burden is always shifted away from the extremely wealthy and placed onto the poor. Again, we need to rebalance the system. And again, whatever system that you're using, the problem gets to be when the government itself starts getting greedier and greedier to fund wars, and whatever tax system is in place, they will start to abuse it and take more and more from the people. We're going to take a break for commercials for 3 minutes. We'll be back with Ellen Brown after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Ellen Brown, who's an author, economic banking expert, a proponent of public banking, where we break free of these privately owned central banks that prey on us all. We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines. If any of you have a question for Ellen Brown, and please keep it on topic, 800-313-9443. Now, the reality is that back when the United States was first founded, there wasn't, in fact, any kind of a personal income tax. As you pointed out, it would be impractical with all the people out on the frontier. But the government did collect taxes very simply by taxing the points of business. And they were able to basically fund themselves that way. But again, there was no restriction on inflation because it was all printed money. And one of the reasons when the colonies won the revolution and they set up the United States, they wanted a currency system that was based on a commodity of known recognized value. And that's why our monetary system was originally based on physical metals. Those coins they were putting on out, the coins weren't the money. The metal in the coin was the money, and there was some additional metal for durability and strength. And the paper notes were not money. They were merely claim checks for the coins so that you wouldn't get weighted down with too many of them. Sadly, we have lost that system, and it is all fairy tale money now. And modern banking is not a science. It's run like a religion. It's a bunch of arbitrary rules created by the bankers for you to believe in that bring great benefit to them. So getting us on back to the present day, it does seem like the system is spiraling out of control right now, that they can't get it back into some kind of a balance. And we're hearing all of these financial experts saying there's got to be some kind of a major correction, event, crash coming on. We know right now that the Federal Reserve is literally creating more fairy tale money to basically pour into the Wall Street to try and keep things looking good. But anybody walking along the streets of our country, looking at the retail vacancies, the cracked pavement, the homeless problem, they understand something has really gone wrong with our economy here, and we do need to address it. And we may be coming up on such a significant economic upheaval that it will see the end of enslavement to private central banks and the rise of public banking, or possibly a more responsible, balanced form of banking that really serves the nation rather than acts as another privatized for-profit venture for the money addicts.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, banking is one place where you actually could have a public-private arrangement, as in North Dakota, where the Bank of North Dakota basically serves as the central bank for the state, and then they partner with the local banks, which are private, and the local banks go out and find the customers, negotiate the deal, but the Bank of North Dakota comes in and buys down the loan, participates in the loan, helps with capitalization, helps with liquidity, and allows these local banks to take on loans that they couldn't otherwise take on.
Okay, so we actually have a caller on the line who wants to talk about the Bank of North Dakota. Rick in Arizona, are you there? Rick in Arizona.
The Bank of North Dakota was basically a farmer rebellion. That's how it started. But don't you still have the same problem? Unless you get rid of the Federal Reserve note, I mean, as soon as the stuff starts to catch fire, they're going to crush it. I mean, the Bank of North Dakota is unique. But just see what happens when you try to start another public bank. It's going to create a lot. They're going to start coming out against it, don't you think?
Right now, yes. But we have a number of movements going, and first of all, states are realizing that they're getting screwed. Like California is the 6th largest economy in the world, and it pays a lot more to Washington than Washington pays back to us. We really should be our own country, but at the very least we should have our own bank. And once they get it, once legislators get it, that this is a way out of their debt problems, then they do get more adventurous. So we have a number of legislators now who are backing this idea. Kind of have to get all your ducks in a row, before you go out there and play your hand. But I'm hopeful. I think the governor, the lead candidate for governor in New Jersey is making a state bank the basis of his platform.
Ellen, I'm going to have to put you on a pause here. We got to take another commercial break. They're kind of oddly spaced in the show. Rick, stay on the line. We're going to come on back with Rick and Ellen after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Ellen Brown, and we're also talking with Rick in Arizona about the Bank of North Dakota, which is a very good example of how you can have a bank that actually works to support the state and the people rather than simply make the bank owners very, very rich. And before I turn the microphone back on over to you, yes, you're going to see a lot of opposition from the private central banks to anything that appears to cut into their power and authority. If you've ever read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, there's a very long history of these private central banks interfering in the affairs of nation-states to an often violent degree in order to preserve their control over the economy and their profits. The War of 1812 was started in part because of the U.S. government shutting down the first bank of the United States. So we know that one of the possible motives for the assassination of John F. Kennedy was his creation of the United States note, which was an interest-free currency put into circulation, and that cut into the profits of the Federal Reserve. And then Kennedy was assassinated, the United States notes were taken out of circulation, and John J. McCloy, president of the Chase Manhattan Bank and president of the World Bank, was installed on the Warren Commission. And I don't care how good a banker he is, he was not qualified to investigate the murder of the president. So he probably was there to make sure that any indications of a link between Kennedy's economic policies and the assassination were never allowed to go public. So, Ellen, obviously you seem to think the Bank of North Dakota is a really good way to go and that we should all follow that pattern.
Yes, well, I agree it's going to be difficult to get these banks set up, but I think if New Jersey prevails, for example, everybody else will follow when they see how well that model works. I mean, already it's because we have the Bank of North Dakota that we even have a movement going, because we have one model that's working actually brilliantly well. There was an article in 2014 in the Wall Street Journal that said the Bank of North Dakota was more profitable than J.P. Morgan Chase. But that article attributed it to oil, but we've had an oil bust for the last over 2 years, and North Dakota itself was really struggling, but the Bank of North Dakota every year has reported record profits greater than the last for the last 15 years. So they're just going like gangbusters. I mean, it's just a really good model. It's just a very efficient model. They have very low costs. They don't pay bonuses, fees, or commissions. They don't have private shareholders sucking out the profits. They don't actually have to have a lot of branches or tellers or ATMs because they're basically a banker's bank. You could have two guys sitting in an office and shuffling numbers around on a computer screen and just making things work. In other words, taking in the deposits of state, that's the model, that by law all of the state's revenues are deposited in the Bank of North Dakota, and then they are able to make loans like all banks do, but they're not actually lending their deposits. So they're actually leveraging their capital, and by now they've built up a very nice capital base. So they can basically make loans for whatever the state needs and do it at half price because the interest goes back to the state. So they're making low interest loans to local cities, and even the low amount of interest goes back to the state. So it's a win-win-win for the people.
It certainly does. We've been hearing about the Bank of North Dakota for a while. Rick, do you have anything else to say here? Because we've got a caller on the line who may have to leave, and I'd like to switch over.
I just want to say, just keep your eyes on North Dakota and see how badly beat up on it. You know, there's international finance out there who would like to crush the state because of this bank, so just keep your eyes peeled on it. Thanks for the call.
All right, thank you very much for the call. And obviously, as New Jersey moves to try and implement the same system, I imagine we'll see a big political stink raised about that. Peter in Dallas, aloha, welcome to the show. Do you have a question for Ellen Brown?
Hi, Michael. Hey, I think the first time I called into you, I asked you to get Ellen Brown on the radio, and I was so pleased to hear her speaking when I turned you on today.
Well, here she is.
Thank you.
Hey, I probably have a stupid question. I just can't figure out why it wouldn't work. I understand about the banking cycle. I've read your book, Ellen, and I get it. But is this a possibility? Could we simply have the federal government spend money into existence, tax without tax, and then let the inflation rate be the tax on the people every year? And then nobody pays taxes, and the tax is the inflation rate. I mean, it seems awfully simple. I'm sure there must be some reason why it wouldn't work. But
yeah, because then you'd wind up in Zimbabwe territory where everybody's carrying around paper notes saying $100 trillion, and they would be seen as virtually worthless.
The federal government overspends now.
The problem is that wages are sticky. You can't really get wages to come up the same rate that you inflate, that you put money out there. So you're going to have a lot of people that just can't afford things. So then demand falls off, and it's a drain on the economy. It slows things.
Well, I'm saying no one tax. The only tax that they would experience would be the inflation rate.
No. You got to listen to what Ellen's saying. You've got to listen to what Ellen is saying because
you've got to pay for your products with the same wages. So if things go up, if your rent goes up and you don't have the money in your wages, then you're not going to be able to pay your rent. So somehow you've got to get employers to keep in step with the inflation rate. I mean, it's a pretty hard system to regulate. It would be easier, it seems to me, to do a financial transactions tax instead of income tax, where you just shave a little bit off every transaction, including all these financialized transactions, which is actually where the big money is, much bigger than our little sales purchases. I mean, if we only
it would shift the tax burden back onto those who have the resources to pay the taxes. Peter, we're going to let you go here real quick, and before you take the next phone call, all right, bye-bye.
Nice talking to you. Thanks for calling.
Before we, well, let's go on to the next caller anyway. Jeff in Idaho, aloha. Do you have a question for Ellen Brown?
Hi, Ellen. I was helping when Ron Paul was around in 2008, and this is a question like in regard to Joan Beyond with her when central banks rule the world. Your work, the British East India Company, the Dutch East India Company that have been doing the bankers' wars that Mike talked about for the past 350 years. Would a county model of the three with the county sheriffs work better than trying to whack a whole state like New Jersey at once? Because there's two systems going on. There's one of international commerce that's based on fiat money, and then there's the original, U.S. notes that were based on trade and hard currencies. Do you think that if Trump was trying to come at you and from that direction, that you could maybe help him with some policies like that?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question, but I agree that local is a good place to start. I mean, we have a lot of movements for cities to set up their own banks. The problem is you've got to have enough money in your city for deposits and capital to capitalize this bank. But cities are where you can reach your government, and have an influence, where it seems to me we really don't have any control over what goes on in Congress. But I didn't understand what you meant about influencing Trump.
Using national notes, there's people that are working on getting back the original bankruptcy from the 33. Like the Rings of Power and your story in the Web of Dead about the Wizard of Oz, explaining that it's a banker allegory on different things.
Right.
It was very touching on how you put that together. But there's a lady in Alaska, Anna von Reitz, that is basically trying to get all of the stolen funds from the bankruptcies in 33 back in the hands of the people that would be at a community level. And that's that would be the touchstone point to basically bring this forward.
Well, I hadn't looked at that, but that's interesting.
Yeah, her website is Anna Von Reitz, ANNAVONRETIZ.com, and PaulStrammer.net has her postings daily.
All right, well, we'll take a look at that. We'll definitely take a look. And
thanks, guys.
All right, Jeff, we're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines now because I'm sure Ellen has a lot more to say. We did get a question by email, though, and this is a good one. I get asked this all the time. What is the difference between a regular bank and a credit union?
A credit union actually does lend its depositors money, so it doesn't do the same kind of leveraging that a depository bank does. And the credit unions are circumscribed by regulations. There was an actual effort to suppress the credit unions and that whole model. But it's a very good model in the sense that the credit union is owned by the customers, and so the profits basically go back to the customers. The difference between that and a public bank would be that a public bank is owned by the government. And the reason we want the government, like particularly your local government, to own the bank is that we want to be able to leverage our own money for our own communities rather than sending our deposits off to Wall Street where they earn whatever, some minuscule interest rate on the deposits, and then Wall Street lends the money back to us at a much higher rate, or does bond issues that are circumscribed by these interest rate swaps and so forth that wind up costing a fortune for local governments. I mean, we've gotten scammed many times by Wall Street. In fact, Wall Street they're known crooks.
Yes.
So we have this movement now to divest from Wall Street. But the question is, if you pull your money out of there, where do you put it? Because governments have way more money than a credit union could handle, or even local banks really don't want government money because they have to collateralize it at 110%, which means they have to put up actually more money as collateral than they get in deposits. So it doesn't really do them any good.
Well, getting on back to the topic of inflation, one of the alarming things that happened, I think this was about 10 years ago, is that the U.S. government stopped issuing what was called the M3 aggregate indicator. And this was very simply a calculation of how much currency was in circulation at the time, and it was relied on as being a solid indicator of the rate of inflation. And then all of a sudden that is now being withheld. We know that the U.S. government's calculation for inflation is suspect because it does not include food and fuel, which are the two areas where inflation tends to show up first. So one of the problems I think we're all dealing with is that we can't rely on the information we are actually getting from the government about the state of the economy. We know the unemployment figure is an absolute joke. They're saying it's down 4 or 5% unemployment. Well, that's only the number of people who lost their jobs in the last couple of weeks. And behind them are more than 90 million legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find a job for months, if not years. And they're simply being treated like they don't exist anymore, because if they were being calculated in, the official unemployment rate would be above what it was during the Depression of the 1930s. And so it's kind of hard to figure out what's going on. But again, it's getting back to the point I made at the beginning. We're seeing all of these financial experts who are out there saying the system is on the edge of breaking. I have another question from you from the email. No, I'm sorry, that was the same question. Disregard that. So, Ellen, getting on back to infrastructure, one of the alarming things that we have been seeing happen is a cycle where a government, local, national, will use taxpayer money to build some piece of infrastructure. Then there is a hue and cry for it to be privatized, where it is being sold into possession of a corporation, sometimes foreign-owned. They put toll booths on it, and it almost seems like that is another form of scam, because since the taxpayers paid for it, it's the taxpayers' property. Should the government really have the ability to simply take something that the taxpayers paid for and turn it over to private ownership? But we're seeing this happen in Greece right now. We're part of this strangulation program coming down from the IMF in Brussels, is that Greece is being told they have to start privatizing more and more of Greek national assets. And I don't know where the end of that is going to be. Maybe the Parthenon is going to be a new decoration in front of a casino in Las Vegas or something, like they did with the bridge from London. But it almost seems like the end goal of all of this private central banking manipulation isn't to have all the money, because they know it's just made-up fairy tale money, but to actually take the real assets of the world and put them all in their pockets. It almost sounds like a return to feudalism, where instead of the people owning the land owns the people, and we're all just the serfs of the few ultra-rich lords and ladies. And it almost seems like civilization is going backward at this point.
I agree. Feudalism is the goal. Do you remember Aaron Russo's movie where he said he had been befriended by a Rockefeller? It was Nick Rockefeller.
Yes, I remember.
Who thought he could bring Aaron Russo into the inner circle, and so he was divulging all these secrets. But Aaron Russo didn't agree to join. But he said, "Why do you care? Why do you want all this? You've already got all the more money than you could spend. What's the goal here?" And Nick Rockefeller said, "Well, the goal is we'll chip everybody, and then ultimately we'll chip everybody, and then we'll have, if they don't obey, then we just turn off their chip, or turn off the money in their chip." But then I know Catherine Austin Fitts thinks that the chip is about more than money. It's about mind control. Or once you've got this chip in you, then it's like becoming a robot, essentially. I'm getting into all this UFO stuff lately, but the original civilization was Sumer. That was the first language, the first everything practically was in Sumer, and it just appeared suddenly. I think it was 3,000 years ago right there basically in Iraq.
Hey, they invented beer.
They invented what?
Beer.
Right. Civilization part, excellent. And there were two gods. There was Enlil and Enki, and Enlil just wanted a worker. They genetically manipulated us, and Enlil just wanted a worker race, like a race of cattle. So basically robots. He wanted no feelings, no awareness of right and wrong.
All right, Ellen, on this topic, we're going to have to agree to disagree. And I really, for this last segment that we have coming up, let's get back to banking and economics, okay? So we're going to take another break.
Okay, well, I just say one thing. I mean, the whole goal was basically transhumanism to turn us into robots.
That part I understand. All right, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program. We're talking with Ellen Brown. And Ellen, I'm going to address your other topic here really, really quickly. Humans have existed pretty much in our present form for 500,000 years. We only have historical records going back a few thousand years, and it keeps pushing backward. But we really don't have any idea of how human civilization has evolved in the past and then been eradicated. For example, we don't know what human civilizations may have existed before the ice ages, and the glaciers would have simply ground it all away. Göbekli Tepe is estimated to date back 11,000 years ago, and so this idea that the Sumer just popped up out of absolutely nothing. They used to say the same thing about Egypt as well. Now they're finding out there were antecedents as well. So let's put away the flying saucers for a little bit. We have about 4 minutes left. Is there anything you want to share with our listeners?
Okay, well, I'll just say the only thing that prompted me to look into that is this whole deep state thing. I mean, it just certainly looks like our new president just got captured by the deep state.
He sure did. I am so disappointed.
Yeah, and they've been pulling the strings for, you could argue, for 300 years, which would go back to the Bank of England.
That's it. It's the people with the money. The people with the money. We used to have laws in this country limiting political contributions to candidates to keep them subservient to the people, and over time those laws have been whittled away, especially that Citizens United decision. And so Donald Trump isn't listening to Ellen Brown or Michael Rivero. He's listening to Sheldon Adelson. He's listening to Goldman Sachs. And that, unfortunately, does put us back on the verge of a new feudalism.
Yeah, well, and I just wonder if once they get up there, they take them into a little room and they show them a video of the Kennedy assassination, or, you know, I mean, I think they get threatened. I think they must, and we've heard rumors of such things.
Yeah, well, it's obvious he did get corralled, and I think the lesson coming out of the last election is it almost really doesn't matter who gets voted into the White House. They're just a figurehead. The agenda for the deep state just continues on. More wars, more economic hardship, more deterioration. Of course, my political agenda last year during the campaign was more about not letting Hillary in there than so much supporting Trump. And had Bernie Sanders not had the nomination stolen for him, I probably would have supported Bernie Sanders as well. But I think more and more Americans are realizing that we have lost control of the government. It's under the control of the wealthiest families of this country. And some of those families acquired their wealth through very nefarious means in association with the CIA. But it feels to me like our country is on the verge of a Soviet-style collapse, and that might actually be the best possible outcome for the situation that we're in. It would certainly open the doors for the public banking movement as we rebuild the nation and say no more privately owned central banks, because they're tools of enslavement. They are not there to serve the people and the nation. They are there to make their owners rich on the backs of everybody else. So,
well, and my hope is that when they realize there's no, I mean, the reason I keep writing and hoping to get some ideas out there is that you really could fix all this quite simply if you just, you know, take the blinders off and issue the money and pull it back. Issue it first and then pull it back.
Yeah, but the private bankers don't want that. They want the system they have now where everybody pays them a piece of the action for all commerce. Ellen, got to let you go. It's the end of the show. Thank you very much for spending time with us today. We're going to be heading on out of here, and we're going to get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. We will be back tomorrow here on Republic Broadcasting. Aloha, America.